So I'm going to be introducing Ursula Urrea Mariño, who's a member of PROPLAYAS. I think I may be pronouncing that right, and is from Mexico, North America. Ursula is a Mexican PhD candidate in the Coastal and Marine Systems Sciences program at the Hart Research Institute at Texas A&M University, Corpus Christi, in the United States. She's dedicated to studying integrated management of coastal zones in Latin America and is focused on the privatization of the Mexican coastal zone from administrative and factual perspectives. As a member of the Ibero-American Network for Beach Management and Certification, she has collaborated in the project Democratic Beaches and has also been interviewed by the press several times about her work related to beach access issues in Mexico. The floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction. My name is Ulsía Mariño, as I mentioned before, and the presentation for today that I prepared for you is Mexican Coastal Zone Privatization, Beach Access and Free Transit Challenges. So Nicolas will be the one behind the scenes pushing the button to the next slide. So next, please. And this picture is from Cancun. So if you don't know anything about Mexico, maybe you have been listening to Cancun. So keep that in mind. So the agenda for this presentation is first introduce what is the Mexican coastal zone for you, what are some issues related with national security and also with foreign investment law related with the coastal areas, how that impact the urban design and structure. And then we jump on to the privatization issues, and then I talk briefly about PROPLAYAS network and then the Q&A. Next, please. And in that images, you can see a legend that private property, So this is Mexico. We have more than 11,000 kilometers of coastal. If you add the continental and the insular territory, we have faced two oceans. On the west side, we have the Pacific Ocean, and we divided in three different oceanic bases: the Northwest Pacific, the Pacific Tropical, and also the Aquarium of the World, the Cortez Sea. And on the Atlantic side, we have the Gulf of Mexico and also the Caribbean Sea. Next. So we will talk about how coastal is defined from the environmental law point of view. And we must say in Mexico, we don't have coastal law. So it's divided, all the regulations from the coastal areas in Mexico is divided and is spread around many legislations, but we will focus only on two in this presentation. Next. So in broadly speaking, this is a role related with the coastal ecosystems in the Atlantic side. The Atlantic area is mostly coastal plain, so we have mountains that they have like jungles, and then we have a variety of wetlands in the middle of the jungle and the sea. It could be mangroves, it could be sinkholes, many of them. We have a lot of them. And then we have the beach, the dune beach system, and then we have the seagrasses and the sea coral reefs. Next, please. And then on the Pacific Ocean, we have some ecosystems that also share these characteristics of the Atlantic, but we also have kelp forests, a higher range of intertidal ecosystem, oases, and also we have desert. So next, please. So this is the ecosystem that we have, broadly speaking, in Mexico. Now we will set our focus on the national assets law and the legal figures that define this variety of ecosystem. Next. So this first want to say that for the majority of those legal figures, the free transit is allowed on all of them. Next. So we will start with the Maritime Terrestrial Federal Zone, onward SOFEMAT, and all the keys and reefs all around the country are in their totality as SOFEMAT. So this is federal owned or public assets. So we have more than 4,000 isolated reefs and cays in Mexico. Next. And we have another definition for SOFEMAT related with artificial marinas or also estuaries dedicated to aquaculture. So on the left picture, you have an estuary in Sonora, the Pacific area, that is dedicated to aquaculture. And on the right side, you have a marina in Los Cabos in Baja California, also in the Pacific. So when you have a SOFEMAT in between those estuaries or marinas and the sea, you don't need to delimitate a SOFEMAT. But if you don't have a SOFEMAT in between them and the sea, you must apply or delimitate one that is not exceed 3 meters long, and they don't need to obstaculize your maneuvers or the facilities. So that is important. Next one, please. So also SOFEMAT is, please next, delimited on riverbanks. So when you have a delta or a river going, and this is the Talva Sea, the most important one in Mexico on the Atlantic side, you have from the sea to 100 meters inside of the river, the SOFEMAT, and then you have another figure that it's also federal property on the riverbank, but that it's the coastal part of the river or the delta, and then is the riverine part. And next one is the estuaries, lagoons, lakes, or other marine waters or reservoirs. This is a picture of the Chacagua estuaries on the Pacific side of Mexico. And you have, even though the estuary is not connected all the time with the sea, all the periphery of the estuary has a 20 meters wide SOFEMAT. Next one. And also in Mexico, we have cliffs. And this is a picture in Colima, the Pacific area. So when the slope of the cliff is 30 degrees or less, you can have a SOFEMAT 20 meters from the high tide mean. And when you have a slope bigger than 30 degrees, you cannot have a SOFEMAT, like in the image. Next, please. And the last one that I want to introduce you is the SOFEMAT when, and also another figure that we have, that land taken from the sea. When next you have a previous beach profile, next, and then you have accretion of that beach, and that accretion means that you have a new beach profile and you need to delimitate a new SOFEMAT. So itself, the land taken from the sea is a figure, a legal figure to define the coastal area. And on top of that, you have two SOFEMATs, the old SOFEMAT and the new SOFEMAT. Next one. And this SOFEMAT, the last one that I will show you, apply for the most of the beaches that we know, the sandy beaches, that ones that are mostly used for the tourism of beach and sun. And also another figure that is the maritime beach, which is basically the wet part of the beach. They have, this is interesting because we have beach, maritime beach, and then SOFEMAT together. And after finish the SOFEMAT, it start or beginning the private property, which is municipality or ejido, which is a common way of, it's a community way of land or ownership of land in Mexico, mostly for agricultural and livestock activities. And this is a private property. Next. So in SOFEMAT and Maritime Beach, the free transit is stated on the law, on the regulation. However, next, the access to the beach is something that is not regulated in any Mexican regulation as the level of the free transit. Next. So why am I talking about national security? Because all the coastal areas are equal to borders. So we have an extension border in Mexico, and this is an image of a Navy facility in one of the Atlantic side of Mexico. But also, next, it's important because at least in Mexico, we have plenty of activities, economical activities. One of those are the oil and gas, and it's very important. But the other one, it's the tourism, as I mentioned before. So Mexico itself has something that it's restricted zone for foreigner investment, which is a stripe that you can see on this map from 100 kilometers for the land borders to the territory and 50 kilometers along to the beaches. And this map actually is curious because I take from a webpage that advertise like you can buy a beach in Mexico, which it's not possible. So next one. So this restricted zone for foreigners investment is important because when the oil and gas boom happened in Mexico in the 1970s, in 1973, this area was open to the foreign investment. And this investment was at that time private trust fund between Mexican banks and the foreigner investments. And the bank owns the land, but the investors may administrate the infrastructure or the activities related investments. And also the real estate participant certificates were created in which basically say the foreigners investors could own the buildings but not the land. And this is important because at that time was created the integrated planet centers, which onwards will be SIP, that are the economic development policy based on sun and based beach tourism in Mexico. Next. So in 1993, with the neoliberalism policies arrived into Mexico, the corporations, they happen another constitutional reform, and corporation, even with 100% of foreigner investment established in Mexico, were considered as domestic ones. And again, they cannot own the land, but again, they need to have a trust fund with a Mexican bank, first for 50 years, but they can renew these indefinitely, so forever. They have the owner rights, not the land rights. Again, next. And in 2013, it was a proposal reform to the constitutional to allow to the federal, the foreigner investors own the land. That doesn't happen, but it's important because it's on the table. Next one. So taking this in consideration, we have, broadly speaking, two main differences, urban design and structure in Mexico in the coastal areas. On the left side, we have the enclave tourism, which this is an image in Los Cabos in Baja California, versus the ocean drive design, which is mostly an heritage or colonial heritage that you mentioned before, because we were a Spanish colony. So it's important because most of these enclave tourism are those SIPs. That is a model that remains relevant, and we will talk about more at the end of the presentation. So keep in mind that too, please. Next one. So now we move on to the administrative privatization. What does that mean? Next one, please. So it's defined to facilitate the necessary legislative and administrative reforms from transferring ownership and public assets to the private sector while implementing private management techniques into the public administration. Next. So to operate this administrative privatization in Mexico, and particularly in the coastal zone areas, we have some legal figures that, administrative acts that allows that in Mexico. And again, we are only talking about or free transit on the beaches, the Sofemat and the Maritime Beach. Next one. So these administrative acts, more therefore the main importance are four. The first one is the concession, which is an activity that permits the use and utilization and sometimes exploitation of the assets belonging to the federation to public domain by private properties. And when I'm saying these public domain assets, I'm talking about this, the Sofema, the Maritime Beach, and the land taken from the sea. And that's it. And then we have the incorporation, which is an act of an alienation of these public assets by privates. The transitory permission, when the government allowed to have privates to engage in temporary economic activities such as street vending or, for example, providing services like the massage on the beach. And last but not least, when a government allows or have a contract with a private entity to allow them to provide a public service like security on the beach or to the provision of collection of the waste on the beach. Next one. So these administrative acts happen in different legal figures in Mexico. So we come back to the maritime, beach, and SOFEMAT next. So on the maritime, beach, and SOFEMAT could happen concession and transitory permissions. But only on SOFEMAT could happen, in addition to those next, contracts with private entities. And another one that is important to relate with the access, next one, which is the corporation agreement. Next one. And next one. Two more, please. Destination agreement. Please, before. The destination agreement is when the federal government, which is the one that is regulated the beach or the federal zone, allows that the entity that is next to the SOFEMAT, the private property, in this case is for a municipal government or another federal government, could you imagine like a natural protected area, have access to the SOFEMAT. And it's like a making a way. Could you back to the previous one? Previous one? The previous, that one. Thank you. Thank you. So rather than private property, it could be, federal or municipal property. And the access at this point could be fulfilled in two ways. If it's not a government asset or public asset. If it's a private property, when the urban fabric, that means since from an urban ordinance that you have from ordinance of the territory or the planning of the territory, they establish a public access, like naming at a street, you may have a public access on the beach. Or when you have a concession on SOFEMAT, it could be stated on that concession that you allow the right of way to access from the main street that is closest to the beach through your property. But in reality, I have never seen a right of way state in a concession title. So it's hypothetical situation, at least at this moment. But when you don't have this tool or this access established in some like local ordinances, it's mostly impossible to access to beaches. And especially if you remember this SIP, these tourism enclaves, in which they are designed that no one except the people that is at the hotels or the condos or whatever may access to the beach. Now, next one, please. So when you have a SOFEMAT on a cliff, you only may have concessions. Next one. And when you have the land taken from the sea, on the land taken off the sea, you can have concessions, transitory permits, and contracts. And the other one that I think it's important, next one, is the incorporations, which means when TGM transit from the public asset to a private property, because you can take or you can ask to the government to that land because was, the beach profile change. And you can see on this image, the green area is a land taken from the sea. And you can see on the right side of the image, there are some houses there that they cannot be there if wasn't for that accretion of the beach. So they used to be federal or public assets, and now there are private assets. And in a very broad way to thinking, it's like we are losing public assets or national territory against this or using this legal figure. Next one, please. Now we are talking about factum privatization. Next one. So what I'm talking about factum privatization? There are social practices that hinder or impede access to and free transit along the beach, and the beach could be understood as the maritime beach or the SOFEMAT. to people based on their skin color, occupation, race, or other characteristic considered inappropriate. And this is very subjective. Next. So these practices may include construction of infrastructure, temporary or permanent, and beach erosion, confusing or absent signalétic for the access, establishment or access control points, presence of security personnel, or encroachment upon access routes. Next one. So in this, we are talking again, the law established free transit, but they don't establish clearly about free access to the beach. Next one, please. So in this, you can see some images related factum privatization. From left to right, to the top to the bottom, we have some beach in very high touristic area in Mexico, in the Caribbean area, in which is segregated all the national tourism, and you can see even a street vendor, but you cannot see this image in the other, that is the next one on the right, which is in front of a condo, in which that signing is confusing because they say private property, but right after they say SOFEMAT. So people, they don't know what is the meaning about SOFEMAT and private property. They may say, or they assume, oh, this beach is private, you know? They have this temporary infrastructure to restrict the access to the beach. Also, on the bottom left, you have like this sketchy access to the beach. That is a right, or it's a true access. Even though they have a sign, it's not clearly, maybe it's like, I don't want to go to the beach over there, you know? On the middle, we have this fence, this hard fence with an advertisement with the 24 hours vigilance. And then we have the checkpoint entrance to the beach. And you must pay to go through that property and reach the beach. Next one, please. And there are some other concepts associated that I'm not explained fully here, but they are related with this factum privatization, which means our exclusion, self-segregation or segregation, stealing, encroachment, dispossession, that I will close in with that, and also how the beach may be perceived like a public spaces. The beach is a public space for, in Mexico, at least in the law state, for everybody. It doesn't matter what is your citizenship, but with this factum privatization, a public space with is perceived like an space with private use, not with the public use. And also how the limited access could be happen, or the people may think about that is restrict access, access closed, private property, no trespassing, road closed, and the most threatening ones, I think, there are private beaches and exclusive beaches, because again, they not private or exclusive beaches on the law in Mexico. Next one. So what happened when we have privatization in the media? Because the word privatization is used repeatedly in media. So for example, in Colima, some local areas ties, or they have these reclaim on the merchant complaints about dispossession on the places in which they are placed. They have their activity, but there are some hotels that they want to place on that areas, you know? Or for example, when people is trying to transit on the beach, but they are, you know, it's like another good looking people that they are looking for tourism. So there are some Pacific public demonstration to show to the concessionaires, in this case a hotel, that they have the right to be there on the beach. And also another one that I think it's increasing in the past years, it's how companies, real estate companies from US and Canada are advertising in US and in Canada, like you can buy a beach in Mexico, or a piece of a beach in Mexico, when it's not. In reality, it doesn't happen, but they advertise like a second residence for foreigners to establish in Mexico. Next one, please. And what happened when administrative and factum privatization happen at the same time in the same territory? So the extreme case is the dispossession. Next one. And with this, I'm closing. So this is an example that is happening right now on the Pacific side of Mexico, in which it's the planning to develop a new enclave tourism. And I mentioned before, it's a model that is remained relevant. So this dispossession, the media, it's not like a an academic term, but it's a media one, is an institutional dispossession, which is territory force appropriation mediated by the institutional action, and this case is the trust fund, plus the interest of the real estate agencies, and increasingly, sadly, in our country, is the organized crime is involved. So this is very important topic, you know. Again, we have national security, we have economic interest there, and we have public and citizens that are in those areas, local communities that are involved. Next one. So this topic, it's not something that is new. So in the PROPLAYAS, which is the Ibero-American Network from Beach Management and Certification, we have been studying this. So please, next one. So one of the professors that is now here at the event, Flavia, they organized in partnership the Second Beach Access Network workshop last year. And next one, we have been working in this Democratic Beach project, trying to compare different definition of beach and the beach management, and also beach access and transit in the Ibero-American cross-national countries and research. And for that, I have been interviewed in media about the Mexican case study. Next one. So thank you very much for your patience with these technical issues. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. You can scan the Q code for PROPLAYAS work and also for the Community Resilience Group in which I'm a PhD student. Thank you.
Thank you, Ulsía, and what a wealth of knowledge, and I learned a ton, and it's crazy the fragmentation, but also the complexity of this space in Mexico. So I really appreciate that. We're just at the 45-minute lunch hour, and I see there are a couple of questions and some comments, including a comment for you to, or an invitation for you to present at a conference, which was in Spanish, so that's a translation that I'm relying on here. So I'm wondering maybe what we can do is let folks chat, and you can answer questions through the chat, and we'll let people start to kind of go to lunch, and we'll plan to start the next session as indicated on the agenda. But I really appreciate I have a list of questions for you here on my paper, so I'll put some of those in the chat as well if that works for you.
Yeah, of course. I'll be here and answering your questions through the chat. Thank you very much for your time and also for the interest in this topic.
I see Hannah has her hand raised, so maybe I'll.
Oh, I just as people are gathering their lunches, what a really interesting talk. I did put the question in the chat, but I'll just ask. There's so many things here that felt very familiar to me, even here in Nova Scotia. But one of the things that I found especially interesting was your point about foreign developers advertising public beaches as private access to, say, someone who might buy a condo or something like this. And I wondered if the Mexican government or other groups are trying to deal with that. I realize it must be hard because the advertisements are being done elsewhere. But if there's any sort of enforcement against that type of advertising, and then I guess part two of the question is, when those developments happen, do you see a lot of conflict coming from people who expect private, but have been sold essentially a false promise, and actually it is public space?
Yes and yes. But I may say, yes, there are like local advocacy to first try to inform local people that what is happening, because as you mentioned, you cannot say or you cannot block or deny the advertisement outside, because that advertisement doesn't happen in Mexico, happen in US and Canada. So it's not a way to stop that. I'm not aware about any public enforcement to avoid or try to restrict that kind of fake advertising. To be honest, I don't know. It's a very nice question, and we may look for that. And when they arrive into Mexico, it's more through social media and some newspaper news rather than something that enact or enforcement of law, in which people try to, how do you say this in English? Exhibit the the practices of this segregation and this even violence that the people from foreigner has to the local ones when they arrive and they expect to have these private properties. And the extreme case of these cases is, for example, when they advertise the nude beaches, like it's completely, and I've been in places that it's like a next to an access to a beach, a nude property, or a property that advertise like you can be nude here, basically. So yes, they're even violent. I'm not saying that the Mexican people it's like a poor Mexican people, but because no one has the clear information about public access is not it's not something that we may sure on the law, but the free transit, yes, so everybody can transit the beach. The people, the foreigner think that is the property includes all until the sea, and Mexican people also sometimes, I may say too, they don't respect the concessions. So it's in both sides, but yes, I think mostly relies on the real estate agencies and the kind of tourists that they are looking for, because it's not like a ecotourism or like a cultural friendly or mindful kind of tourism. Is mostly people that they want to live while most of the time, or people with low or medium income from their countries, so their first countries. So even though they don't have enough money to have like an expensive life, like a private condo, mostly there are RVs or like something that is even modest for a foreigner. So yes, the expectations with the reality is crashing all the time.
There's another comment in the chat for you. But I have one small follow-up question, and I think you've discussed it a bit, this issue of real estate agents. That is an issue I've seen in the Rhode Island Facebook page. We see it here in Nova Scotia, where there is no obligation for a real estate agent who is listing a property to investigate more than whatever the selling person tells them. So, for example, in our case, we've discussed with realtors here that oh, that there's a public access point here, or that this property has been traditionally used for 100 years as access to the beach. But when you sell it, they are not including that information. And so the purchaser is usually is the person who receives this problem, and the community is really angry at them. And to me, I wonder, we discussed, is there a way forward on this? And I wonder if there's a way to create an obligation for real estate agents to investigate and report in their advertising, like the nature of public access related to the property that they are selling. Obviously, realtors don't want to do that. But I wonder if that's a solution, because it seems that they are the person ultimately in control of that message.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know. I don't think so, because if that some advocacy groups may say that on there, but as far as I know from the academia for the legislation and also the advocacy groups, it's not happening. And from the real estate point of view, the ones that I interview when I conduct, and this is important to say, I conduct this research more than 10 years ago, but I opted for this, and it's like it's worsened the situation. So these real estate say, no, actually, we don't care about these local conditions unless it's something that is threaten our business. If not, it's like, let it be. Laissez faire. Yeah, it's the answer that I have for you. Sorry.
And I see a lot of also interesting and comments and questions in the chat. And yeah, thank you again for that great presentation. Lots of great images and perspectives in terms of like the different things you would expect, and also beautiful coastline. Absolutely gorgeous coastline.
Mexico is beautiful. Not only the sea, please go to mindful tourism, ecotourism, and cultural responsible tourism when you visit Mexico.
Yeah, and it'd be good if that you have any like examples or of that, or links or resources for that
I
responsible
will put it
ecosystem.
on the chat.
Yeah, that would be really great. I think it'd be great to see those.
Mhm.
All right, appreciate your presentation, and I'm glad we got the tech stuff resolved.